Good afternoon, folks. I think I got everything set up, so we will go ahead and get started. Make sure everything's good to go for today's jam stream. There we go. All right. We'll put on some background music and kind of break down what we're going to be doing today. I haven't done one of these streams in a while because my PC was dead, so I had to refamiliarize myself with all my sounds set up again. Let me know if I'm either too loud or you can't hear me, especially when I put the beat on in the background. I see Snake's here. What's up, Snake? How's today going for you? All right, move this slightly over a little bit. It is nice that I have my tablet on an arm now so I can get it out of the way, and I keep my keyboard somewhat in front of me instead of having to slide it on the other side of my desk. But it's still a little bit cramped here. We have everything set up, but hopefully everything is coming through okay. Are we good on audio? Okay, Snake's giving the thumbs up for audio. That's good. The real simple beat I've got in the background is just something I threw together while the stream was loading, just to have some background noise while I talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing today. Again, it's been a while. Fortunately, I've had a lot of time to think a bit about some of the beatbox topics I wanted to cover in the next jam session, and I've come up with some stuff I think will be an interesting way to build on things we've talked about in the past. So what we're going to do is, like usual, we'll start with some warm-ups, basic kind of freestyle practice to get the blood flowing and everything properly warmed up. And for the technique and sound theory part of the jam stream today, we are going to be returning to technicality, one of the things I've talked about a lot on here. But I spent the last day or two and earlier this week specifically putting together some drills for practicing the basic beatbox toolkit and also applying technicality. So it's a twofold sort of goal with the drills. I'll talk more about it when we get there, but it's meant to reinforce the basic tools and then also introduce the idea of working in technicality so that you're using it to transition between parts of beats and whatnot. And I'll kind of give a real quick breakdown for the technicality stuff before we start talking about that, in case people watch the archives and haven't heard me talk about this before. And then we'll probably talk about that for a bit. I've got a decent amount to kind of cover and talk about, so it should take a small bit of the technique sound theory part of the stream. And then for the remainder, we'll be doing BGM brainstorming. And I got to pull something up in one of my folders here because I got to remind myself what I wanted to focus on for the BGM portion. Because I think what I was talking about on stream the other day, I believe Halloween is done. Where's my folder? Let me take a look at my track list in the file here. Yeah. Okay, wanted to double check. So the Halloween list of tracks that I needed to create, record, and get ready for the release in October is done. I might swap some in if I create one along the way that I like better than what's in there now, but I think everything's dialed in for Halloween. So we can look a little bit further ahead on potential releases for stuff to come up with. So for folks who might not have heard me mention it on stream, again, the next major music release for the BGM pack is going to be the beginning of next month. I think is what we decided for that. Everything is done. I got the final art from Pups this week for the next release, Shaken, Stirred, and Chilled. And everything's ready. So we'll probably be finding a time to stream the launch party for that one at the beginning of August. And that release is going to be the kind of more mellow, chill, and down-tempo ambient type of collection. And then after that, it'll be straight on towards Halloween. And I still have to figure out the art stuff for Halloween, which is why we were doing the drawing streams earlier. So the music side's done, but the art side isn't. So between now and Halloween, I've got to get all that figured out. Beyond that, I haven't quite figured out what I'm going to release next. That might be what we work on for the BGM portion today, is ideas for the next collection of tracks. There is another EP that's scheduled to be on the release calendar at some point whenever I need to fit something in. That one is the 329 EP. That one is essentially done already too. It's been done for a bit. That one is four songs, so EP is like more than a single. And so it's a few tracks, not just one, but it's a themed release based around the 329 synth. All the tracks use that particular synth instrument that I have on the synthesizer right here. It's off at the moment, but when we get to BGM, I'll turn it on. And so that might be something we can play around with too, if I can come up with some more ideas to put into that EP. It's only going to be a few tracks. It's meant to be just kind of a fun one-off release, not related to anything else. And so that should put us out through fall, going into winter and the new year. Haven't quite figured out what I'm going to do yet. So we'll kind of see what comes up along the way as we come up with BGM ideas a little bit later. So with that said, let me turn this off. And I need to briefly make sure my levels are okay for my beatbox instruments. I think for the synthesizer, it's okay. In fact, we'll clear this. But I want to make sure I'm not redlining for the rest of the stuff, especially my snares. So let's see, for the inward K. Nah, that one doesn't usually peak super hard. It's the PF and the BGM that usually hit red on the mic if I'm not careful. So let's see. Okay, that should be all right. Okay. I think it's all right as long as I don't point directly into my mic for the BGM. It's the sharpest and loudest. So I'll just try and be careful. Keep an eye on the audio levels here. All right. So I'm going to run through some warm-up stuff for the intro / warm-up section. Then we'll move on to sound theory after that. So let's get the blood flowing and get started. All right, let me get a drink here. Hey, I see Red Dragon's here. What's up, Red Dragon? Welcome to the jam stream. How are you doing on this? Still Sunday for you, right? Yeah, Sunday evening for you. Hopefully, you are having a decent day. Ooh, we got an old man music recommendation from Snake. All right, Snake. Before we get into the next segment here, let me go ahead and change my caption. Do you want a genre, Snake? While I'm setting this up. If so, let me know, and I will dig into the archives and find something. Snake says, you got any upbeat video game OST? Oh, do I? Let's see. I think the best place for me to look would be in my actual video game music collection of stuff. That's not a genre I expected someone to request, but I do have a lot of recommendations. So let's see. 20 years or older, upbeat vibes. Let's see here. Six says, I got to keep you on your toes. That indeed you do. Wasn't expecting the Japanese music recommendation, so that expands everything, not just, English music. I will caution you that I don't really listen to any other music in other languages besides Japanese. So if you ask me for like a K-pop recommendation, I can't give you one. Let's see. How familiar are you with the NES library of games and their soundtracks? Feel like recommending a Mega Man game is pretty low hanging fruit. I got one. I got one that's kind of an obscure game. I haven't played it on stream, but I did play it back in the day because I'm very old. And I think you could find the soundtrack on YouTube just by looking it up. It's not so obscure that people haven't talked about it. But the game is from the NES library. It's made by Sunsoft, the people who made Blaster Master, which is my favorite NES game. And the game is called Journey to Silius. And it's got 6 or 7 or 8 total songs. It doesn't have a big soundtrack, but the songs are really cool. It's kind of like synth wavy-ish electronic. I'll put the name of it in the chat, and let me see if I could find it on YouTube real quick. That way I can link it in the Discord so you can listen to it. It's got a really small but really cool soundtrack, one of my favorites, and I never hear people talk about it. The game itself it's like a side-scrolling action game, kind of like a run and gun platform shooter type game. It's pretty simple. You get like run to the end of the level, and it's decently difficult too. Let me see if it's on YouTube. I think I saw it here not too long ago. That was probably incredibly loud. Okay, this is a playlist. I should be able to share a link to the playlist that has like all the tracks from the intro music all the way through to the end. So let me put that in the Discord real quick. We'll make sure this actually posts. Okay, that should work. It has 12 total themes from prologue, intro to ending. My favorite song is the second stage music, which is track 4 of the list. All right. So yeah, you have to check that one out and let me know what you think. It's pretty underrated soundtrack. The game itself is okay. It's fine. It's very short. It's very difficult and very short. But the music slaps pretty hard. So enjoy. Lava King, hey, Lava King's here. Lava King says, "Hey, Raku, my day got worse today because I learned that today is the anniversary of my other grandfather's death." Ah, that's unfortunate, Lava King. I know we were talking about coming off a funeral yesterday, but I think it's good, not to get super serious, but I think it's good to remember the anniversary of people's deaths as a way to celebrate their lives. And again, I only say that from the perspective of someone with no grandparents anymore. My last grandparent died last year. But I think being able to remember the good times and celebrate the lives they had is the most important for any relative. So hopefully you feel better. As far as what we were talking about, Lava King, to kind of hopefully lighten the mood a little bit, Snake redeemed a old man music recommendation, and I recommended something because he asked for a video game soundtrack from an old video game soundtrack. So I linked it in the Discord. I just put it in there a minute ago, but it's from an old Sunsoft game called Journey to Silius. Really cool soundtrack for kind of an obscure game. So we were talking about that before we get into technique and sound theory. We just finished warm up, and now we're going to be talking a bit about some technicality stuff. And Lava King says, "Now, Rocco, I want your opinion as a music producer." Well, I attempt to make music, but I'm not a producer. I don't know music production, but I will give my opinion as best I can as someone who's trying to learn production. Lava King asks, "Where does new metal begin, and how is it different from regular metal?" Okay, that's a good question. I can speak on that a bit as a big metal fan. Are you talking about new metal, like NU metal? Not new as in the opposite of old. I'm assuming you're talking about new metal, like the style of new metal, not necessarily just the newer style of metal. Could be either, but it's NU for new metal. So I just want to be clear because it changes how I answer the question. Yes. Okay, I got you. New metal, NU. So to me, and I'm not a historian of metal music, so the idea of new metal has its roots further back in rock. So like new metal is typically thought of as like hard rock metal-ish type sounds that combines like a little bit of DJ and rapping. Rap rock is pretty much synonymous with new metal and how it evolved. So if you have things like a band that has a DJ or another MC that raps or the main vocalist sings and raps, that's essentially what new metal evolved into. But the idea of having like rap type lyrics and hip hop elements and things has always sort of been in rock music here or there, but it didn't become like its own real style until it kind of diverged into like a harder rock sound plus rap rock elements. So the roots of it can kind of be traced back to older bands like Red Hot Chili Peppers and Faith No More, who incorporated a lot of kind of like rap-ish stuff into their songs, but they weren't really like a hybrid. They just had some elements. And then to me, new metal really kind of became a thing in the mid to late 90s into the 2000s, especially in conjunction with like things like sports scenes. You see a lot of new metal tracks in wrestling and whatnot. So big bands that are kind of lumped under new metal would be like Limp Bizkit is a big one. Kid Rock, I think, in his more earlier days. People consider Linkin Park new metal. They kind of span a bunch of genres, but the idea of heavier stuff with like Mike Shinoda's rapping, that would be considered, I think, new metal. And so, to me, to answer your question, Lava King, mid late 90s is when I kind of mark the start of new metal. And how it's different is that, again, it incorporates like some of like the DJ tech and rapping. That's the main difference. Let's see. And Lava King asks, as a metal fan, do you find screamer and heavy metal, do you find that line blurs? You mean screamo? Because it kind of depends on what you're asking with that one, Lava King. Because I really don't like that people call harsh vocals screamo, because harsh vocals have existed long before the whole inception of emo music and emo culture. There's a whole bunch of different sub kind of categories of harsh vocal technique that I really dislike the fact that some people just lump it under what they consider just screamo in quotes. To me, if something's going to be screamo, it's got to be an emo song that has screamed lyrics, not just harsh vocals. Because you can have growls, you can have like fry screams. We might talk about that at some point in the future. We'll see. You can have other types of growls and screams that are different types of techniques, false fold screams, a whole bunch, and it all changes the type of sound, and is done in a really specific, controlled way so that person doesn't destroy their vocal cords. Because if you just scream like as loud as you can, and I'm not saying do that, but if you were to scream as loud as you can, you'll damage your vocal cords. It's a really bad thing to do to your voice. You can blow out your voice. You can cause really bad damage. But when you hear in a lot of songs harsh vocals, whether they're growls or even like high-pitched, harsher type sounds, those aren't the vocalists just screaming their lungs out in most cases. They're using really controlled techniques to cause distortion from their vocal cords in a bunch of different ways, depending on the technique used, to create that harsh sound in a way that doesn't hurt them. And probably one of the more common ones is fry screams. That one is fairly easy to figure out, but takes a long time to kind of master and learn. But if you can do it correctly, then you can make those types of really harsh sounds and still be able to sing normally if you're doing a mix of harsh and clean vocals. And so it comes down to technique, which is what I don't think a lot of people realize if they're not too familiar with any music that has harsh vocals, whether it's legit screamo music, metal, any of the different flavors of metal. There's a lot of technique that goes into doing that so that people can do it without injuring themselves. And it's really interesting to break that down. Lava King clarifies, I mean, heavy metal where you don't know what they're saying. So if you're talking about really like heavy distorted vocals, like heavy harsh stuff, if you're asking what I think of it, I think it's really cool technique, but I don't really get a lot out of like some black metal and other like really like extreme type of alt metal where the growls are really distorted and you can't make out the words. I've listened to some groups that do that. I don't mind it so much, but it's not really my first choice. I like to be able to dissect what's being said a little bit more. So if I'm going for harsh types of music, usually I'll gravitate towards melodic metal, things where there's definitely, you can hear the lyrics, but it's sung or growled in a harsh manner instead of a clean manner where it's just sung normally. Kind of depends on my mood, but I like a mix. Usually if a band can incorporate harsh and clean vocals, I tend to like that a bit more, but it depends on my mood. Like we've talked at length, maybe it's been a while, maybe in the last several months, but one of my current new favorite bands in the last year is Sleep Token, and they mix the vocalist Vessel and the other dudes that kind of supplement live. There's a mix of harsh and clean vocals in what they do. And so you have a lot of really cool sung melodies and then harsh bits in between. Like one song off their last album, funny enough, it's called Vor. It is entirely, with the exception of the choruses, it is entirely harsh vocals, and it's a really cool song. But it is difficult to sing unless you know the technique for doing harsh vocals. Love King says, I wouldn't recommend screaming as hard as you can. I did that once in grade 2 and felt something pop in my throat and haven't hit a high note since. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's not only your vocal cords. I think if you're not careful, you could damage your hearing too, because all that stuff is connected, and auditory and respiratory. So that's what the technique comes in. Lava King says, technically speaking, it's impressive, but as an art form, it has much to be desired. That's kind of a matter of perspective and opinion. There are some metal vocalists out there for bands I don't really like a lot, but I really respect their ability and technique. Just because like the stuff they could do with their voices is crazy. And again, it's not just random noises. It's very controlled, very practiced techniques in order to get the insane sounds they do. One guy is Alex Terrible from Slaughter to Prevail. They're kind of like a Viking metal band. That dude, his voice is so strong, he can do his growls without a mic on stage. I've seen it. He'll do like the harsh parts without a mic, and you can hear him in like a big venue, like an auditorium venue. It's nuts. But yeah, the whole technique for metal stuff is very interesting. I think you can find a lot of variety in style, in composition, and just overall flavor in metal music. I've been listening to it, I'd say, since about 2000s. So I'm not like an old school metalhead, but I've listened to a lot of stuff that's old, a lot of stuff that's newer, and a big mix. So if you guys ever want metal recommendations, that you can include that in old man music recommendations if it's old, or if you just want me to recommend something a little more modern, I can do that too. All right, good sidebar. I always like to talk about music. I probably should have put like a quick loop in the background. They had dead silence for like 15 minutes, but that's okay. Let's talk technicality. The technique sound theory part of the discussion today as it relates to beatboxing. This is something we've covered before. The idea of technicality is not new. I think I've probably talked about it a dozen times on these streams, but it's one of my favorite things to discuss. Kind of like Lava King's question of technique when it comes to vocal techniques and something like singing, vocals, metal, and whatnot. Technicality is another tool for beatboxing that, on its face value and concept, is not really that complicated, but its application and the depth to what you can do with that concept of technicality is bottomless. You can do so much with the idea of taking sound combos and putting them into sets to slot into beats that it comes down to creativity and just mastery over the technique. So what I've done today, for the sake of the discussion, was spending some time last night thinking about how to present all this information. I've put together some drill patterns that are a mix of practicing the basic concepts of the beatbox toolkit, so like your kick, hat, snare, but also factoring in technicality, one, just to practice, and two, to learn and adapt in your brain the ability to plug it in. Because you could sit there and do fast patterns all day long and be able to do these combinations, but if you can't apply it to a beat, it's meaningless. It's like knowing how to play one guitar solo but not know how to play any other notes. And so I think it'll be interesting to talk a little bit about how I've come up with these ideas for patterns and drills, in case any of you folks who hang out here decide you want to learn beatboxing and you want somewhere to kind of jump off when it comes to being able to practice. So to recap, first off, real quickly, the idea of technicality as a concept. I'm not going to entirely just say go watch the other streams, but any of my archives where you see the word technicality in the title, I talk about it there too. So if you want different explanations of what it is, feel free to go check that out. And, can you hear me talk about it back then? But to real quickly define, let's see, Lava King says, "Hey Raku, I hate boy and episodes and cartoons when it's in sync XB and not a Backstreet XB. Boy band episodes when it's in sync, not Backstreet Boys." I'm assuming that's what you meant. Is that because you're a diehard Backstreet Boy fan over in sync? I have no horse in that race, man. I don't care in the slightest about boy bands. I think it's funny when they show up as cameos, especially when I think Family Guy probably clowns on NSYNC more than anybody else. But they're punching bags. They're easy targets. Like South Park has done it. They made fun of the Jonas Brothers in the Disney episode, which I thought was a little more creative way to do it. But making fun of boy bands is it's like picking on the one goofy kid in class. It's too easy. It's not really a creative humor strategy to me. Simpsons. Well, yeah, the Simpsons are pretty much the lowest bar for comedic creativity right now. Maybe not the lowest, but pretty low. Back in the day, their celebrity cameos used to be incorporated in their plot lore. Nowadays, it's just, hey, here's a famous person that's on The Simpsons, and the gag writing is not as clever as it was. 2002, huh? Yeah, I'd say that was definitely during the start of the decline. I think maybe around then, a little earlier, depending on when the seasons fell, is when you started just seeing, hey, here's the celebrity. Look they're here, instead of it being like an actual character on the show. But again, I heard The Simpsons got somewhat better recently, but I haven't watched that show in probably decades. But okay, good question or good point. Let me try not to lose my train of thought too much, otherwise we'll never get anything done today. For technicality, again, to define what it is sound sets created in conjunction to form a combination that's used to supplement parts of a beat. It is not necessarily speed patterns. A lot of people use them as speed patterns, but just because it is able to be used quickly doesn't mean that's what it's always the way it's always applied. So, two patterns I think for the most part we'll see here in the example drills that I've put together. We have the TKK, a triplet pattern, which is the one that I had to learn a little bit later because I didn't start off learning it, but it sounds like three sounds. The T sound is just a hat. The K sound is a rim shot snare, which we'll talk about because it's going to be the first drill I talk about anyway. So you have, actually, that's the third one. Excuse me. Second sound is just a sound, just a K sound without the vocalization. So it's 1, 2, 3, and you do it in one rapid triplet pattern to get. And the TKK is one of the most elementary technicality patterns. I've talked a bit about its history before. A lot of people, when they're getting into beatboxing, learn that one first to start getting good with learning how to combo sounds together and ultimately working towards speed. I think a lot of people see beatbox videos of people in the scene doing crazy speed runs and all sorts of fast things. A lot of times they're using the TKK because it can be done really rapidly once you get good at it and chain it back to back and doing all sorts of stuff like that. I didn't learn it right away because I couldn't do the rim shot for a while. So I learned a different combination that became my mainstay, which was TKP. Doesn't use a snare per se. It uses the same two sounds to start, but instead of the rim shot on the third, it uses a P or B sound on the third. So it sounds like or the B/P sound is essentially the same because it's lightly done, but you get as the triplet pattern. And that's what I kind of practiced in the beginning because it's the first one I learned. And so we're going to see, I think I'm going to do 3 or 4 different drill types with different snares that are going to plug in these technicality sound sets as a way to practice. So, done a lot of talking. Let's actually see what that looks like. So the first one is going to be a TKK practice drill pattern, and it's kind of a hip-hop-ish beat, a mid-tempo hip-hop-ish beat. It's done more or less the same way and meant to isolate the sound set and the sound snare. So it sounds like this. And I kind of intro them all the same way, just again, practice them all the same way. But it starts off, I'll do the intro, then run through it for a few iterations and kind of explain what I'm doing. Okay. So it starts off like this. And it kind of loops. It's meant to loop endlessly with, minor tweaks and variations in between. So very simple. There's no bass in any of these. It's all percussion sounds to practice. And the snare being used is the rim shot, which that's a really tough one to explain. I've talked about it in like the snares and basics discussions a long time ago. But unlike the inwards K, which we'll talk about in a different drill pattern coming up, which sounds like it's sharp and kind of breathy, the rim shot is not breathy at all because there's no air being used. It's just mouth pressure. So it's very short and sharp. And that's how you're getting that. Sounds like almost more like a clicking snare rim shot. And it's part of the TKK pattern. Which is why it works pretty well in this particular drill. And the TKK pattern is actually primarily being used as a 4-note because it's a little bit easier for me to slot in, but it blends so much together that you kind of hear it as 3 notes, but it's technically 4 because it uses F TKK. So an F is just like a F or a F. Technically they call it a F hat. It's F TKK. If you do it slow, then you hear 4 notes. But when you put it all together really quick, the first 2 kind of combine and blend into 1 note. So you get. So the drill itself cycles back and forth between this simple rhythm and taking either the 3-note TKK or the 4-note F TKK and plugging that in as a filler beat or filler section within the beat to transition and practice the technicality. So again, it's real simple tempo with the and the practice, which also helps with freestyling a bit, same concept, is thinking about where the rhythm flows and where it makes sense to slot in that or either the 3 or 4 note to make it smooth and transition between the different sound sets. And that is a pretty good way to practice because it's forcing you to take your tools and apply them. So a little bit of freestyle practice, well, just drilling over and over again, the idea of taking the technicality and plugging it in. The point is not to get super complex with the beat itself. Just keep it simple and keep it consistent so that you're practicing and moving things around in a way that lets you, again, get comfortable with the tool set and get something that's going to ultimately sound good or sound interesting to the listener. And so this particular rhythm type and tempo, I adapted for 4 different types of snares. What we'll do is we'll run through each iteration. I think I have time. I'm trying to keep an eye on the stream because I want to devote the last hour or so to BGM brainstorming like we normally do. But this is a really interesting concept that we haven't talked about at length in this manner. So I wanted to spend some time talking about it. Again, if people who watch the archives or are here hanging out on stream decide they want to get into beatboxing, learning technicality is really fun. It's a fascinating part of the style and the art form of beatboxing that I really like talking about, which is why we talk about it all the time. But let's switch the snares, keep the pattern format the same, but we're switching the snares and the technicality pattern to the TKP, the and a PF snare, the more dull head snare head hit type sound. One of my favorites. I use the PF snare a lot. But same type of rhythm, but now we're going to be experimenting with using the TKP and the PF snare to practice and plug in either that triplet pattern with the TKP, or there's another one that I'm introducing for this one because it's really easy to do with that instrument combination, and that's an F sound. And I don't think it needs to be classified separately, but if you take the F sound, like an FT or FTB, you get something like, that's technically a technicality sound because it's a sound combination. It's FTB is the notation, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Instead of a. So this one technically has two different ones. It can kind of go back and forth, but I'll see if I can structure it in a way that makes sense. So here's what that combination sounds like with the same drill, tempo, and format. And we'll see how it sort of plays out over several repetitions. So we would intro it the same way. We'd go. And so for this one, I feel a little more comfortable experimenting around with the combinations here because, again, the TKP triplet pattern is one I've been practicing since I pretty much started. And it feels very comfortable and easy to manipulate. But you might have noticed just listening to that stretch of drill that in addition to just the, it would be combining with the F sounds, you get something like, which is a much longer stretch than just a back to back. And so that's a little more advanced way of taking the drill and stepping up its complexity because you're taking the technicality pattern. In this case, there was an FTB and a TKP I was going to use, and I start stitching them together in slightly different combinations and I added some double kicks in there too, which double kicks are another way to sort of add more layers of complexity to it, which is how you were getting, like, I think I did something like that, where you're mixing up a lot of kick variations and then adding in the FTKP and TKP, FTB, and all that, and you're elongating the chain to make it more complicated, which is where you want to get to when it comes to being able to have a good command of technicality. You want to be able to take all those individual sounds and start stitching them together to make more long, intricate chains. Not to the point where it's so excessive it just derails your song, but you want to get it to the point where you're creating something interesting for the listener, whomever you're doing the music for, either live or in a performance or in a recorded setting. You want to be able to add flavor to what you're doing so it's not just the same beat over and over and over again, the same way drummers on a drum set will add fills and other kind of ad lib improv type things to what they're doing to give the auditory experience more variation. Like someone wouldn't be sitting there doing fills all day long, just wailing away on a drum set, or you'd hear nothing. But a lot of times they'll spice up the rhythm by mixing up things in between where they have breaks to add in like a couple extra hits or fills or whatnot. That's what technicality is. It's like the improv additional flavor that you can do with beatboxing. And that's why it's so fascinating to talk about. So third one, again, 4 different drills, 4 different snare sound set types. Third one, this is the inwards K, the one I showed off earlier that's a little more breathy and sharp, similar to the rim shot, but a little bit more air behind it because you do breathe in, and that's the probably the toughest of the snares to figure out initially when you're learning beatboxing. I did break the technique down in one of the older streams here. And that one, I say consult the tutorials from people out in the scene so you can see what they're doing a little bit easier, because the mechanics of doing an inwards K, it's kind of tough, but once you get it, it's just practicing it to make it sound clean. But we're going to take the inward K, plug it into the model for the drill, and instead of doing the TKP, TKB, or TKK type technicality, we're going to be using inward drags. We're going to use what I call a sucker punch drag combination, which you hear me do for folks who've been hanging around these streams a long time. Every time I get asked to drop a beat, my intro, whenever I start off, sounds like, and I've had a couple people ask in the past where that comes from. Those are sucker punch drags. It is a sucker punch, which is basically you breathe in sharply and then you seal your tongue to the roof of your mouth to seal it quickly, and you get that thump. It sounds kind of like a real like dry thump, not like a bass kick, almost like a muted sound that punches, hence the name. The sucker punch drag is that plus you're basically doing like a hip, saying the word hip inwards and rolling it. I could break down sucker punch drag at some point if people want to hear me talk more about it. I didn't invent it, but it's not really commonly used a ton. I don't see people in the scene do it a lot. Seems like a kind of uncommon technique, but it's out there. I didn't make it up. But when you chain that into a rolling pattern, you're getting them. So the drill pattern is going to use a mix of those types of inward drag repetitions as its technicality, either in triplet, quadruplet, or however many. So that is going to be the technicality for the drill. It'll make sense when I actually start, but this one's different than the other ones because it's an entirely different type of sound. I consider inward drags done that way kind of like technicality. That one might be a topic for debate amongst people in the scene, because inward drags, normally they sound like not really technicality. They're more of a filler in transitional sound to regulate airflow. I think we talked in the breathing stream way back about how you can regulate how much air you're taking in and putting out by mixing up inward drags to basically equalize your airflow. And that's how you get things like the where that inhaling sound is turned into a part of the rhythm as a way to bring in air and equalize and give you sustained control over your breathing. For this type of drill, it's not being done in that way necessarily. Instead, it's being used more like a rapid technicality type sound. And I see we have a lot of redeems for hydration from Red Dragon. 5 of them, in fact. All right. Making me chug my smoothie. So yeah, this one is going to be a little bit different, but the drill and the function of the exercise is the same. So let's plug everything in and see what we get for this one. I got to be a little bit careful since there's a lot of inhaling on this one. I'm trying not to choke and die. But let's give it a try. Boy, it's hot. It's actually good that Red Dragon redeemed all those hydrates. It is hot today where I live. And because I'm on an upper floor, heat just rises. So I am sweating. I have to take a shower before I head out after this. So that drill is a little bit more tricky to do. I found it very hard to focus on not adding in the other types of technicality patterns in addition to just the inward sucker punch drags. So in that regard, it is a good practice drill for forcing your brain to not get stuck into the same pattern of using all the same sounds. But another thing that I found, I didn't think about this yesterday when I was putting together this information, but that drill with the inwards K and the drags actually is a pretty good exercise in figuring out how to regulate your air, because the snare, the and the drag pattern, the all breathe in. You are constantly taking in air on every snare note, and when you fill the gaps with the technicality pattern to do the sucker punch drag roll, all that is air that's coming in. So you have to find a way to get rid of it. Otherwise, you have to stop and exhale. So you might have heard in the practice drill where I was using the kicks to put some more force behind them. So instead of just be getting like a, that's getting rid of the air to balance out for the fact that the next few sequences are going to be bringing air in. And again, you're trying to equalize your intake and your output so you're not overloading your lungs. So you're not breathing in too much and you have to physically stop, or losing too much air and having to physically stop. So that one's more than the other two we've seen so far, I think, is a really good way to practice air management. Breathing, which is super, super important in beatboxing if you want to be able to do it effectively. I'm not claiming to be an expert, but learning how to breathe properly and manage your air is really, really important, especially when you're just starting out, beginning. So the last one, last drill, and then we're going to move on to BGM brainstorming with the loop station and the synth here. The last one, same rhythm, same structure, but we're going to be using the BGM snare. And that's the one that sounds like one of my favorites, one of the most strongest and most distinct snares in all of beatboxing, BGM or spit snare. And for the technicality filler, this is what I was coming up with last night while I was thinking about this. This one is going to use the zip. And the reason for that is because the zip and the BGM snare mouth position is almost identical. The zip, which is a filler sound, I didn't invent it, but it's kind of become one of my signature sounds because I like it. And I've developed it a lot in a way I don't see a lot of people really do. In fact, I've never seen anyone do it like this. I'm sure they exist out there. I didn't invent the technique. But you basically say the word Z, the letter ZP, like zip, without the the vocalization. So you're saying zip, 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 and then you force it faster and you close down with your lips on the P faster, and it creates a sharp sound. So instead of just zip, 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 you can hear a little bit of like a buzz in the background. When you do it really strong and you cut it off, you get, and to me it sounds like something kind of shooting through the air really quickly, like a projectile flying by your ear. It's and you could take that sound and you could do it in succession, slowly. You could do it fast. So one thing you might hear me do on some of mine would be to do the zips back to back, which is how you get the. It doesn't require any air, lung power. It requires mouth pressure. That's it. You can't really do like a vocalized humming while you're doing it because you're creating mouth pressure and sealing your airway from your mouth. So you can't really layer too much with the zip, but it's very distinct in sound. And if you do it quickly, you get again the. But if you mix it up with a zip double kick, like a zip BTB, you get. And so this is going to become a technicality pattern. Again, I don't hear people do this a lot, but I haven't talked to anybody from the beatbox scene in years. So I don't know what's out there. I think I mentioned on stream somewhat recently that I don't watch a lot of beatbox videos anymore. I don't have a problem with the scene or anything. I just don't want to watch other people's stuff and have that influence what I come up with. Inevitably, I'm sure I will come up with something that someone has done, but I don't want someone else's style and their technique to like be in my brain and then inadvertently rip someone off. And so for that reason, I haven't been watching as much beatbox content. I check in every once in a while to see how the scene's doing and how the competitions are going. But like all the latest, I didn't watch any of the GBB 2023 stuff because it was locked for a long time on the main channel, Swiss Beatbox. So I've been mostly out of touch with the scene itself. I've just been trying to experiment around with techniques and learn stuff on my own. But I don't know. Someone else might be adapting like a zip pattern. I'd love to talk to them about it because it's kind of unusual technique wise. But we're gonna take the BGM snare, plug it into the drill pattern, and then we're gonna be using a zip technicality pattern to practice. And then this will be the last thing we discuss before we move on to BGM brainstorming. So we're gonna intro it the same way and let's see where it goes. Whew. That might be the toughest one so far. Thinking about the mechanics from an anatomy perspective, that pattern puts a lot of stress on your lips. Because the snare is done with a lot of lip pressure, because the zip is done with almost as much pressure with the you are putting a lot of clamping down type of motions on your lips. And I think that is really useful when it comes to getting better at the BGM snare. I haven't been practicing that one as much, and I think I need to drill that one a bit more because my face was starting to hurt towards the end of that. If you're just doing it for like a minute and a half maybe, just the pressure itself and doing all of the other variables was basically kind of straining the muscles right around my lips. I think embouchure is the muscle people use for like wind instruments, like horns. And so that's actually pretty good endurance training. I didn't think about that. That one also seemed like it was a little more chaotic to manage the beat or the kick, snare, and the hat with the zip pattern. So again, probably the most complex of the different drills of the four. That's probably the toughest one. Second would probably be the inward K sucker punch drag pattern. But what I'm going to do, and we'll put a pin in this for now, next time we talk about technicality, might not be on the next jam stream, but maybe I'll do a status check. I'm going to work this into my training routine consistently, and we'll see if I can report back any noteworthy things I've found or if I felt like it's helped me level my technique up, because I've been sort of just randomly practicing different things whenever I want, but this is going to focus. This sequence of drills is going to focus on basic drill looping and technicality, and I will report back on the results and what I think of it, because I think if you do it a lot, it's going to improve your technique, because it's forcing you to do a bunch of different things, but in a controlled, consistent environment over and over and over again, which is how you practice anything. Just repetition. Repetition for accuracy, consistency, and then speed. You get technique to do the technique, learn how it's done, and then you practice for speed and accuracy slash consistency. And then from there, you start building complexity. So maybe we'll have a discussion in the future about like the next level of drills, where maybe it's a different rhythm that requires more complex things to be done. Maybe we'll do like weird time signature drills. That would also be something I need to practice. Everything's got to be in 3/4 because 3/4 is my nemesis. And so I will go to the grind, and at some point when we come back, I'll let you folks know what I think about the drills and how it sort of worked out for me. With that said, let us move on to BGM brainstorming for the duration of the stream today. Let me change my caption, and then like we've done in the past, I'm gonna have to change my mic setup around a bit, but I'll be able to talk and do the BGM stuff at the same time. So let me change the caption, change my sources, and then we will roll into the next part of the jam stream. All right. I should be plugged into my Scarlett. I think I'm going to come in a little louder, but a little bit less sharp because I don't have the dynamic boosts and the EQ boosts on the setup by default. But let me unmute this, the 505. I'm going to turn on the synth. You might hear a little bit of a pop. Now let's make sure we have instrument input. Okay, I think we have everything from this coming in from the synth. We have, let me save this blank loop here. I'm actually running out of room. I'm on track 89 of 99 on the loop station. I am still trying to plan out how I want to do like a DJ set thing. Originally, I wanted to do it in June, and then my PC was having issues and died. I don't know if I'll have time to do it this month since we're almost in the middle of July, but before I do a big wipe of the tracks and pull them off of the loop, I want to do that. So at some point, I'm going to have to start making room and or come up with a timeline to be able to do that DJ set concert. So that might get pushed into August. We'll see. But for now, we've got 10 more tracks of empty space. So let's come up with some ideas for BGM. I was talking earlier on stream about how the next release that's lined up and ready to go is going to be more chill, down-tempo type stuff. So let's do something a bit higher energy. Not necessarily deciding on tone, like kind of a upbeat versus like a dark brooding tone. Let's just go for a higher energy tempo and see what happens. We haven't really done something completely just off the cuff in a while. So let's see. We can kind of tweak things as we go. So to start, I'm going to go over to the rhythm and let's see what our instrument set's gonna sound like from a bass rhythm percussion perspective. And we could also maybe we could focus on synth 329 as potential additional tracks for the EP I talked about down the road. That is pretty much only restricted by using that synth primarily. Everything else style-wise can be whatever. So maybe we can experiment around with that. Maybe go for like an electronic or like a dance type of rhythm. So let's test sound here. Okay. We could start with we could do kind of like a higher tempo dance beat, almost like a break beat type of rhythm. We could see where that leads, since I haven't done a ton with that particular style. Very kind of like 80s, 90s, like dance pop era type of beat. That's what it reminds me of. You can even add some double kicks in there to make it a little bit less sparse. It's interesting. This is a style I don't really mess around with too much, so let's see what we can come up with. And I'm going to keep the playback about here so that it's not completely drowning me out. Let me know if you can't hear the loop station playback. We can add maybe like a hat run. And doing it rapidly is kind of difficult without running it through one of the repetition filters. But I want it to be in the background more. There we go. I'm going the wrong direction with my volume knob. A little bit offbeat. That's better. We could double up on the snare using a different instrument set to give it a bit more punch. Or we can layer in that sharper synth snare. If I can get it timed properly. That's better. It's a little bit subtle. You can slightly hear it underneath the clap snare. All right, bass line. We are, what's our BPM? 130. 130 beats per minute. I'm thinking maybe we go for like a faster sliced bass line. So rather than just single notes, sustained notes, we have it kind of cutting up and driving more of a rapid tempo. But progression wise, I don't really know what I want to do yet. So let's do this. Let's go guitar to bass to boost the overall low end. And what we're going to do is slice it. Let's go 16th notes to start. Ooh, we can try pattern 5. I don't use that one a ton. 16 notes, pattern 5. And that sounds like this. Oh, whoops. That's ring modulator. That's not guitar to bass. Wrong one. There we go. So this is the bass line being run through a rapid slicer on pattern 5, which creates this kind of like galloping rhythm, which is kind of interesting. It's a little bit kind of counterintuitive to the rhythm of the beat, though. It's not terrible, But if we take that and we go to pattern 1, which is just on the note, on the ones. On the ones with 16s, we get, which I think fits a little bit better because it's not galloping now, it's just rapid fire. Now we got to think about how we want the note progression to sound. Well, I think we'll keep pattern 1. Let's try and boost guitar to bass a little. Let's just see how much low end we can put in here without completely muddying the track. So this is at about 40%. Going above 50 really makes it sound muddy, so I don't think we want to do that. Really loud. I gotta be a little bit careful because of how high the volume is. In fact, let me see if I can lower this a bit. This is the settings for the loop itself. Let me drop them a bit so I can boost the overall sound of my synth. Let's see if that works. Still a little bit loud, but I think once it gets captured, the playback will drop it down a bit. So just to test it. Yeah, that's fine. We'll keep it there for now. Now, note progression wise. Now, I don't think we want to go back down. I do that too much on my melodies. Let's go up 3. And have it sustain for a little bit, and then it'll repeat. Okay, that's relatively straightforward. Now let's layer in some higher end. We'll go to 329 for this. So to recap again for folks who might have heard me talk about it, 329 is called Square 2 on the synthesizer instrument, but to me it sounds like an old video gamey type of synth, very reminiscent of the Sunsoft sound set, which is one of my favorites. So if we go to the low end, it sounds like this. And if we go to the high end, it sounds like this. And kind of in the middle. Really neat instrument. Again, I like playing around with this one just because you can do some really fun stuff with it by tweaking its sound. So, for example, if we wanted to go kind of like a mid-range melody here, we could turn on the slicer again, but drop its frequency down to an 8th note. And that would sound like... I don't think this is octave. This is like a slightly different step progression. 8th note repetition. But we could do something like throw a filter over it to muffle it. Oh, not that one. I can't do it with this particular set. I'd have to go here. They have filter presets on inputs A and C, so we have to go here instead. What is this? Low pass filter? Oh, we did high pass. So it's adding a bit of oscillation to it, giving it kind of distortion. It cuts the volume a lot, so I gotta actually go really high on the volume on the synth itself. So we could experiment around with this combination and see if we can come up with like a melody that kind of counters the bass line a little bit. I think I like the jump up to, what was it, E, without having the D in before it. Oop. Let's get this to start when the bass resets. Even supplement the bass line with the low end instrument range for 329. I didn't think about that. But we could drop it way down so it kind of hides under the rapid slice bass line. Wrong one. We want this one. It's really subtle, but the 329 is in there. I wonder why it comes in more towards the end, though. Let's see if we can fix that. Let's try that again. Yeah, it's very subtle, but it's in there. Now, do we want to keep the high? I think we can do more with that. I want to keep the pattern, the slicer pattern for that one for sure. Maybe we can but we can keep the kind of progression pattern the same, but let's add a different effect over it. Let's see what we got. Could add panning delay. That causes it to sort of, it delays it like an echo, but also moves it around the channels so that it sounds like the sound is moving around your headphones, which is a cool effect. That sound like, oh, that's kind of a lot of delay. It gives it almost more of like an echoey sound, and in the actual sound channels, it's kind of bouncing between the left and the right. I think I like that better. Let's see if we can mess around with the progression a bit. Could even do. I don't know if I want it repeating back to back like that, but I did want to hear what it sounds like. Trying to experiment with going down in the progression. Nah. I've done that a lot. I just wanted to hear what it sounded like. We could go back down from the higher notes. That's a possibility. What would that sound like? I like that better. It's a little bit more interesting than just going up and starting over. Okay, let's save our progress so far. We don't lose anything we're working on here. We've got 3 tracks so far. We have 2 left. Let's see what we can do next. We might be able to alter the sound of 329 to further change it and distort it so that it sounds like a different instrument, but it's not a different instrument, in keeping with the kind of rules of that release. Experimenting around, like throwing filters on it in the beginning. How to lead into the actual introduction of the rhythm. Could try and do a drop. I'm not ruling that out. I haven't done that on a track in a while. Having it lead up to a pseudo drop into the first synth, I think would be kind of fun. All right, what else can we do with a counter or supplemental melody? Could add chords. I'm gonna take the effects off while I mess around with it a little bit. 329, it harmonizes fairly well, but I feel like that can sort of draw the ear a little bit. Like now we're getting really video gamey in the type of sound like this. That sounds like a chord progression you hear out of like an old NES game, which is why I like this synth so much. But let's see what we can do to sort of tweak the sound a little bit. Ooh, if we add phaser, it gives it kind of this lasery sound effect. It's adding like an oscillation distortion to it. I don't use phaser a ton. It's kind of a cool effect, but it's very specific. Got potential. Got potential. Not sold on chords. We can do an alternate melody higher up. This one I feel like would be used in place of the other one though. It's not a bad alternate melody. It's simple. But I think you could probably play around with that a little bit. This could be one of those tracks where we mess around with a combination of like drops and filters and like a real simple set of tracks and just put a lot of effects to kind of vary up the different sections and what it sounds like. That could be fun. Let's save our progress so far. I'm going to run and refill my water bottle real quick. But what we'll do is I'm going to loop the track that way it's not just dead silence while I go for a minute. Let's do the bass line and the beat instead of having the synth there. So I'm going to let this run for a sec. I will be back in 1 minute. All right, I'm back. Sorry for the delay. All right, let's see if we can kind of wrap up what we've done on this one so far. We have 4 tracks recorded. We have 1 more empty that we could put something on. What we need is a supplemental instrument or melody that we can leave on to kind of build everything. I think the way I want to structure this one is to have 3 and 4 be alternate melodies that we can switch back and forth between. But we need something else that can go on in the background that's going to kind of always be there to build up the bass line and the rhythm. We could take the slicer and drop it down to quarter notes so it's a slow rhythm. It'll still be in line on tempo with the bass line because it'll still be the same pattern, just with a slower cut instead of the 16ths. What about 8ths? Oh, 8th is on the high melody. What if we did quarters? We could have this be like a slightly octaved version of the bass line, but just have it really low in the background so it kind of sounds like you have this movement. We could sync that up with what the bass line's doing, but what kind of effect can we put on it? Ooh, this is flanger. This is one that gives it kind of like a wah type effect. If you don't mess around with the parameters, that's not bad actually. So it sounds like it's kind of staggering in between a little bit because the bass line is much faster. But if we dropped it like way down in the mix so that it's just faintly in the background. Okay, that's got potential. But does it clash with the high melody? No, not really. The notes are all very similar. This one doesn't do a ton with harmonizing. The note progression is all kind of within the same sort of couple notes. But what about the other one? The alternate melody. I feel like it clashes a little, but not a ton. The melody just kind of does its own thing, separate from that supplemental lower part. Oh, what's that waver at the end? Did I miss that when I recorded it? That was weird. I could have sworn I heard it waver like a half step near the end. What we could do in the structure is have the supplemental lower part be tied to track 3, and when that one cycles out, then we drop the supplemental lower part. That way it doesn't conflict with track 4, so that one's just going to play by itself with the bass line. All right, let me save this. I think we have this a good skeleton for a track here. Like I was mentioning a second ago, I think the idea of messing around with the effects will flesh out a lot more, and the tracks itself are a little bit straightforward compared to some of the other stuff we've done here on stream. So let's see. I think we would start with the bass line. We go filter. Introduce the beat. We'll let that play for a few bars. Now we go into a pseudo breakdown. I missed it. So ideally, I missed it by like one measure. We want to cut off the drop in quotes so that it comes in at the same time as this one. So I missed the mark on that one a little bit. And then here's the supplemental lower part. So now we're gonna take off these two. That tricky part's gonna be taking the filter off, taking off track 3 and 5, and then switching in track 4 if we wanted this to be the alternate melody. We could isolate the melody on the alternate high synth. We have it play. I'm trying to think of how it would outro. You can even go out on the supplementary lower part. And then have that be the last thing the listener hears. That would be an interesting twist. I don't normally kind of cycle everything out and isolate on that type of section, which might be a good reason to do it, to kind of mix up the variety. All right, let's save again. So I think this, again, it's a pretty good foundation. I don't know if I'm necessarily sold on the final version of the track, but the bass instruments I think are good. This will be a candidate for release 329 because, again, it uses just one synth. Normally we would go and jump across different instruments and see what kind of combinations we can come up with that's going to flesh out the song. But the challenge behind doing the 329 release is only using one synth as the primary instrument aside from a bass line and the rhythm. So more to come on that one. We'll see. I have several tracks that are already done for that one, and I think I'm going to narrow it down to like my favorite 4. And then that will be the release way down the line. We're talking post Halloween. So with that being said, I think we will call it here. I am on a bit of a schedule today. I've got to run out in a bit. Otherwise, I would do another one, but let's call it here. Let me see if anybody I know is online that we can raid. Let's see. Trucks online, playing Valorant. Oh, Moo's online. They're playing, what is that? I don't know Potion Craft, but we haven't raided Moo in a while. Let's go see how they're doing. Let me cue that up. And what we'll do is we will go to outro. I'll mute this and go over here. And yeah, we'll call that a jam stream. Spent a lot of time talking about beatbox stuff today, which is good, and music in general. I again welcome all of the questions regarding music recommendations and all that stuff. You folks know I could talk about that all day long. So good discussions. Hopefully the covering of topics for the beatbox stuff is useful or interesting. I will be working on the stream schedule for next week tonight. It might go up kind of late because again I gotta run out in a sec here. I don't know what the schedule is gonna be. We might be doing Tuesday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, but it's gonna be primarily gaming stuff next week. We'll be doing, actually no, Saturday I gotta lock in for sure. I believe Red Dragon and I are going to be continuing Elden Ring next Saturday, same time. So we might be doing Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. It'll be something new. I'm going to be playing something new on stream that you folks haven't seen before. It's going to be interesting. But we'll also be picking up on SMT5. I know it's been like a week off. But SMT5 will continue, new game, and then Elden Ring Saturday. So it should be a good time. But until then, thanks again for hanging out today. Hope everyone has a good rest of your afternoon/evening. Now let's go see how Moo's doing in Potion Craft. I'll catch you folks later.